The digital transition. The Digital Transition, a podcast series created to assist those tasked with implementing digital strategies, where we will share our knowledge and experiences to support you in your transition. Welcome to The Digital Transition. I'm your host, Nathan Hildebrandt, and today, as we close out our third year and our 40th episode, I thought it was a good time to go back and collate the responses from my guests from the last 2 years and share with you what BIM means to them. Now, episode 20, where I captured the same responses from my guests from the first season of episodes, it was so well received, and it's currently like the fourth most downloaded episode. And I think that it gives you, the listener, a good understanding in one episode, the different perspectives and views on what BIM means to the different people that I've interviewed that are, essentially acting as actors across the supply chain. I think this episode's kind of especially special, if you can kind of say it like that, because the diversity of the backgrounds that I've had of my guests over the last 2 years is probably far greater than the first year that I ran the podcast. But one thing we need to talk about before we take this journey across the last 19 episodes, I really need to thank NBS Australia for their support over the last 2 years in sponsoring this podcast. I'd have to say that without their support, I wouldn't have been able to put these last 20 episodes out there for you to listen to. So for the final time in 2021, let me tell you a little bit about NBS. So NBS, through their key product, NBS Chorus, is revolutionising construction specification through cloud-based collaboration. NBS Chorus integrates seamlessly with your building information model in ArchiCAD, Revit and Vectorworks. Now this increases productivity and reduces risk of conflicting information deliverables. So to learn more about NBS, please head to their website www.thenbs.com.au. In episode 21, I spoke with Delaney from NBS about classification systems. Now, her response was probably one of the shortest ones that I ever had on my show. I did have to milk a longer response out of it though in the end, and we did get a little bit more out of it. But what does BIM mean to Sarah?
The management of information.
I like short and sweet ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I suppose you can add to that the digital, in a digital world, because there is so much information associated with any kind of asset, right through from the original, right through to the end. You've got to have a clear picture of how to manage all that.
In episode 22, I spoke again with Andrew Curthoys about the role that ABAB is playing in industry. It is interesting to hear his perspective 2 years on from our first interview. He believes there's a long way to go for industry to go in achieving our desired outcomes though. So this is what BIM means to Andrew in 2020.
Well, Nathan, this might surprise you. It still means a bloody lot of work that needs to be done across industry and government. That hasn't changed. But I think the thing that has changed, it's valuing the information. It's better information management. It's better information outcomes. If we can have a greater acknowledgement of all industry participants in the value of the data, that is fantastic. We've still got a long way to go, but we are not, the path probably isn't as steep as it was, I would say, 18 months ago, but there's still a long way to go. But equally, look, you're absolutely right. The more you know, the more you want to know, the more you can see what you need to do.
In episode 23, I spoke with May Winfield of Bureau Happold about the legal implications of BIM. Now, it's really good to get the perspective of a lawyer on the meanings of terminology. I'm sure you all agree. Now, this is what BIM means to May.
I would say BIM to me means a more collaborative way of working using 3D modeling and interconnected data as compared to, say, the traditional non-BIM way of working.
In episode 24, I spoke with Brian Sweeney about Queensland's Transport and Main Roads Department's digital transition. I can tell you, I think I've had a successful situation here, and I've been able to brainwash Brian from all the previous episodes that he's listened to, and he's followed suit. But this is in his own words, and this is what BIM means to Brian.
I think, in my mind, we are starting to hopefully settle on the one that we hear most often these days, I think, which talks about BIM being better information management, mate. Anything that improves the accurate, timely capture of asset management information, particularly for a client organisation like Transport and Main Roads. Anything that gives us confidence that we're making the right decisions based on the right information as we move forward in trying to upgrade and maintain, the state controlled road network. It's got to be about the information we capture, how we store it, and then how we share and disseminate that information across the organisations. It's got to be better information management, Nathan, without a doubt.
Now, in episode 25, I spoke with Anna Murray about digital twins. Her perspective has come from a non-constructive side of the digital twin fence, which I think actually brings a great different perspective, which provides a great value. Now, this is what BIM means to Anna.
So BIM means building information management, or it's even wider than that. I like to call it digital engineering now, and it's about capturing the information about the process, the people, and having, as you said, the data classified so that you can reuse it in another environment. So BIM as a standalone 3D model, it's great, and they look great, a lot of them, but it needs to be useful further down in the management of that asset.
In episode 26, I had the opportunity to speak with one of Australia's BIM pioneers in Tom Finch, and about the work that he led with his team at Project Services prior to the Newman government disbanding the department. Now, honestly, I feel that had this government not come in and did what they did in 2011, the state of BIM in Australia would be world leading. And to this day, that's probably one of my favourite podcasts that I've ever put together. And this is what BIM means to Tom.
BIM is the tool that enables many of the other things that we've talked about to be delivered. It gives more opportunities for designers. It gives much more benefit for integration. It's the information there for people to understand what they're trying to do is compounded. So, yeah, it's a central part of the whole thing. I think it's still in its infancy, frankly. I think it's got a long, long way to go because it's still very complicated to do. It's going to get... my vision is that we'll have a drawing board like my TV screen, and you will actually work live on it, and all of the technical stuff that you got to do is being done by the system in the background. So all you're doing is almost going back to your 6B pencil again that you're drawing, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on in the background that complements that. Now that's where I can vision it being at some stage in the future. No idea when, but that's the opportunity.
In episode 27, I spoke to Lars from Co-Builder about the importance of standardised information. Now, Lars's response was probably the most interesting one I've had in all of my interviews, and I would suggest it was probably one of the most philosophical ones of all time. So this is what BIM means to Lars.
If I replied 2-3 years ago, I would have replied, I think, much of the same as maybe other people on your show. But for me, it means a place that we used to be stuck with. But for me, it does not connect me to the reality where I see the world going. So I think it's old. So I think we need to go beyond and start talking about other stuff.
In episode 28, I spoke with Don Cameron about the challenges we're currently facing in industry and whether or not, similar to what we've been doing for the last decade, whether or not we're going to be saying the same things in a further 10 years. Now, Don's views had slightly adjusted from the year before to a more slightly insightful view. So this is what BIM means to Don in 2020.
Oh, that old chestnut.
It's not a laugh.
It means collaboration. It's collaboration. That's it. As long as I'm I've heard plenty of people tell me, it should be called this or it should be called that, and it's a process. It's not a thing. It's a process. I'm like, it's all about collaboration. It obviously is sharing information in a format that everyone else can recognise and interact with effectively, to extend for the use purposes that they need it for, and to help you on your journey and your uses. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to reflect back if I had the same answer 12 months ago.
I'm going to guess it's going to be better information management. That's kind of what I'm going to guess at. But I do believe collaboration is a strong point, I think. In episode 29, I spoke with Bonnie Ryan from GS1 about creating a digital thread. She had someone suggest that BIM was related to death and had some other relationships to circles. This is an interesting approach to life, but this is what BIM means to Bonnie.
Well, for me, it's interesting. Somebody introduced it to me as the circle of death. And But no, for me, BIM is really that cradle to grave process, right? So you've got, being able to, at the end of a job, kind of hand over a full digital record of exactly, of everything that's gone into a building, right down to the light switches, so that owners have a full record of what they're buying into, and that record can be passed on to subsequent owners easily, so that, if there's problems down the track, that, so BIM for me is the full kind of circle, from design right through to maintenance, and even beyond, even sort of reuse perhaps in some cases. And GS1 plugs into there at various points, so it plugs into the BIM model, if you like, in terms of, what products are going to be used, what products were procured, the logistics in terms of products, the materials that were delivered to site and that sort of thing. So for me, BIM is the end-to-end building process. That's kind of how I like to think of it. So I think you've got a lot of work to do. I think we've all got a lot of work to do, but it's exciting and I see nothing but opportunity. So thank you for having me, and look forward to chatting again sometime.
Now, in episode 30, I spoke again with Dr. Marzia Pugne from MACE about level of information need. Now, her views have shifted from better information management in this scenario. So 12 months on, what does BIM mean to Marzia in the end of 2020?
It's funny because I didn't hear back what I answered last time, so it would be interesting to compare the two. But I think that the first things that comes to my mind is really about better information management. Is maybe something that I maybe answered the last time. But I think that after this time that, as I say, that you learn more, but also there are more things that maybe you want also to do, to implement. I think that it's really about finding a way to define and produce and use information during the entire life cycle in a better way. What I want to underline this time is the ethical use of data and the security aspect. So I think that we need to work on this direction. We are all excited about innovating our sector. And I'm passionate about that. I think that you understand that. But we needed to do in a way that digital is there to support the public good and not to instead be used against us. So also in the construction sector, so I see building information modeling that is important that we work in the direction where data are used to do more informed decision for the public good, and not instead to be used to control us, because that is not the word that we want to be. So maybe it can be a discussion for another podcast, maybe in the future. But I think that we needed to be mindful of that, and so to be able to do things in an easier way and to have more time to be spent for what we love.
In episode 31, I spoke with Dr. Stephen Hamill from NBS about modernising the specification process. Now, he brings a few components together with this one to create a whole, kind of similar to a specification in many ways, but this is what BIM means to Stephen.
Try and keep it concise as well. So, for me, it's about the information management side of BIM. So I think it's a mix of two things. It's about getting the process right, getting your information structures right. This allows for collaboration. And if you throw the digital bit in, which has always been my passion from university all the way through, you make everything fly. Process information, collaborate together, get it right digitally, and that's BIM.
In episode 32, I spoke with Greta McNeilis from Brisbane Airport Corporation about their asset management and BIM implementation. Now, in this interview, Greta tried to turn it round and interview me. It's a first for me on this podcast. So this is what BIM actually means to Greta, not myself.
So what does BIM mean to you, Nathan?
No, don't say that. This turns it around. I've already answered this question, but this question for me is always about better information management, but we're not interviewing me today. Come on.
What does BIM mean to me? It's such a complicated question, but I'm going to answer it from the 50,000 foot view. It doesn't just change data. If you think about the evolution of our telephones, first they were in our houses, then they were in our cars, then we could text and email on them and take photographs, and now we live our entire lives on them. And that didn't take that long to happen. And what I see is when I first arrived in the industry 4 years ago, the conversation was about a building information model is a data set that is related to a single building. And that conversation has changed every year to grow into such a broader conversation about why use BIM on projects, why projects that use BIM are more successful, run smoother, have less variations, are just a better project methodology. And I think that that's really interesting. So what BIM means to me is BIM isn't data. It is a new way of managing assets and building assets.
In episode 33, I spoke with Kate Williams from Frontier SI about digital twins. Coming from the GIS space, it's nice to see the collection of ideas that Kate brings together. So this is what BIM means to Kate.
BIM to me is both a digital model of a piece of infrastructure, but also the process to create that model, design that model. Hopefully the BIM of a piece of infrastructure is something that can be used to help operate that asset over time, but is also information that can be used and accessed in wider systems. So I'm a digital twin kind of advocate. So what I see the BIM is a potential source of information for broader decision-making outside the owner of that asset. So it's also an opportunity to collaborate in the digital world, like the building is part of, the system in the real world.
In episode 34, I spoke with Paul Shilcock from OPRA about ISO 19650. Now, when you listen to this, it seems like Paul really didn't want to answer my question. But in the end, he came through and put an interesting concept on the table that seemed to ring true with a lot of the guests from this year. So this is what BIM means to Paul.
Oh, really? Well, I don't think my response is probably going to be as exciting, if I'm being honest. So I guess the short version is the BIM for me is the collaborative production of information. Okay. And what I mean by that is going back to BS 1192, which defined the process for individuals and teams to work collaboratively to produce information, to coordinate information. For me, that is building information modeling. And the process is defined, the information management process defined in parts 2 and 3 set out the manager of information to enable the collaborative production of information, aka BIM. All right, I'll give you a little bit of a backstory to this as well. So when the first initial drafts of PAS 1192 Part 2, it didn't contain the word BIM once, okay? And the client at the time was the UK government, who had just gone out and banged this big BIM drum and BIM level 2, and the framework document didn't have the word BIM in it. So the compromise was that the title of PAS 1192 Part 2 was around the manager of information when using BIM. Okay, so if you want to use BIM, this is how you manage information. And that has continued into ISO, thankfully. So we've got the title around there about the manager of information during the delivery phase when using BIM, and the operational phase when using BIM. And so, when you're talking about individuals and teams working together, again, enabled by a lot of the amazing technology and innovation that we're seeing within the industry, but it's very much about people and people working together collaboratively to produce that information. So for me, that is what BIM means to me.
In episode 35, I spoke with Callum McGuinness and Paul Candy from Assa Abloy about their digital transition. Now, taking the perspective of people from the supply chain at the manufacturing and product side, I find is quite valuable, and it's not really not a view that we're capturing too much in the market at this point in time. But this is what BIM means to Callum and Paul.
Nathan, I see BIM as the management and the new order of information. Across many levels, providing control management, improving efficiencies, right throughout the life cycle of the project, and it will continue to make the specification and the scheduling of doors better.
Better, I like it. It's going to make it better. Now,
well, we can strive to make everything better. It would be great.
Good as better. But now, Paul, what does BIM mean to you?
So if I could sum up BIM in one word, I would say BIM means collaboration. It's collaboration from the architects to the specifiers to the builders to the owners, and I guess to touch on Callum's point, it's collaboration through the life cycle of the building. So it's something that lives and breathes as the building goes through its life. That's how I guess I would sum up BIM today. Probably different to how I said BIM 10 years ago, to be honest.
In episode 36, I spoke with Kelly Cohn about automating the laser scanning process. Now, Kelly's perspective, and we might call it Kelly's soapbox views on BIM, actually is quite a clever approach. And I think for some, it might actually kind of change the way in which the acronym's actually used. Now, this is what BIM means to Kelly.
So yeah, this is my favorite old soapbox. So I am a big believer that the modeling in BIM, building information modeling, does not stand for what you think it stands for. And I don't mean you specifically. I think you and I have actually had this conversation like 4 years ago. But to me, the value in BIM is not the B in BIM is the 3D model of the building. It's the building. But we already have building. We don't need to say building and model. I is obviously information, but anybody that's watched the weather understands when they talk about the weather model. That's what the model in BIM is supposed to stand for. It's a model from which to predict outcomes. That's the entire purpose. That's why we do BIM. We do BIM to predict outcomes, whether it's schedule, whether it's cost, whether it's quality of design, whether it's, how it looks when you sit down in this chair or walk through the lobby. BIM is a tool to predict outcomes. And if you stop thinking about it as a modeling tool, as if the model is the end result, and you start thinking about it as a modeling tool to predict the outcome, that is a complete change in perspective of how you think about applying BIM as a business. And so that's particularly when I'm talking to executives or principals or people like that, and they bring this up, like, that is the thing I harp on, is like, guys, you're thinking about it wrong. BIM doesn't create a 3D model. BIM creates the opportunity for you to predict the schedule, or to predict the cost, or predict this, or predict that. And if you're not using it for that, you're using it wrong. So stop thinking, it's just like I don't know if Princess Bride is as big in Australia as it is in the United States for people of our age range. But it's like, you keep using that word, but I do not think it means what you think it means. Like that's modeling in BIM. You keep saying modeling, but it doesn't mean what you think it means. It means predictive analysis. That's what it's for. So that's my BIM soapbox in a nutshell.
In episode 37, I spoke with Clifton Harness from TestFit about parametric design. Now, Clifton brings a true software programming response to my question. It was kind of expected, and it kind of made me laugh. But this is what BIM means to Clifton.
What does BIM mean to me? It is a logic ecosystem that I can query to do highly detailed drawings. I don't think of BIM as a authoring tool. I don't think of BIM as a great technology even. It is simply a logical system that enables machines to communicate what buildings are.
In episode 38, I spoke with Alice Leong from Brick and Mortar Ventures about the future technologies that will make a huge impact on the market. Now, it's quite interesting to hear Alice kind of reflect on her views of what BIM means to her throughout her career, but it's quite interesting to see how it moves from looking at problem solving to the level in terms of understanding information. But this is what BIM means to Alice.
Yeah, so BIM to me is more about the information, and it's the linking of information and being able to get the right information at the right time when you need it. So that was my, when I first joined the construction industry, I fell in love with building things virtually and then building it in real life to find all the problems. But as I, progressed in my career, I realized that not everyone saw the world that way. So if we were to dumb it down and make it kind of the lowest common denominator, like the information and the data is what we need, whether or not it's 3D, 4D, 5D, whatever it is, as long as you can link all of that information in a place that people can access and understand, that would be a winning world for me. So probably a different definition now that I'm, more progressed in my career. But yeah, the information is the key part of BIM for me.
In episode 39, I spoke with Dr. Carol Hon from QT about her research on safety on construction sites. Now, I think Carol actually comes in now as the most succinct response to this question. I think she actually she beat everyone, and I couldn't pull anything more out of her. But this is what BIM means to Carol.
To me, BIM is the process that helps to achieve better project outcomes, such as safety, time, cost, and quality.
Now, interestingly, a common thread that can be taken from the guests over the last 2 years, it's a strong focus now on collaboration and information, which I think is a really good sign for industry as we move forward. It sees a shift in the thinking from geometry. It moves forward into actually focusing on how we can actually collaborate better together to achieve better outcomes for our industry. So to you, the listener out there, thank you very much for your support over the last 40 episodes and 3 years. Now, over the last 3 years, there has been great interest from industry, and the podcast at this point in time has been downloaded just under 16,000 times across all of our platforms. So we're glad that you're really enjoying it. Now, it's been great to be able to share my knowledge and the incredible knowledge of all of my expert guests. But I look forward to sharing our next podcast with you in the second half of next year. Until then, good luck with your digital transition. digital transition.